Hi everyone, I'm Alex Klatskin. As introduced, I'd like first to mention that I am a capitalist. I am also a recovering architect. For the next 10 minutes while I speak, I just ask one thing: let these remain shipping containers. They are shipping containers. They are shipping containers in this stack. These are not affordable housing units. This is not the Biennale. These are shipping containers, and I just asked 10 minutes. Please let them stay that way. So most of you know shipping containers. You see them in large piles in New Jersey. You see them on chassis, toting around your new flannel shirts, and the little thing to trim your beards. And they come from places all over the world. They come on boats mostly. They come registered in other countries like Panama and the Bahamas, not because of taxes, but because of labor laws. But that's another lecture, I think, altogether. These really became useful during the Vietnam War. There was no way to get goods over to Vietnam. So how do you fight a battle in a country which has no infrastructure? You bring your own. You set it up yourself. You bring containers on the boats you already had. You bring the chassis. And there were about 150,000 to 200,000 containers in Vietnam towards the end of the war, representing about 15 million square feet of warehousing, about a third of the supply of warehousing in most of Southern Asia at the time. We now take them back. We didn't realize that fire hose of containers would be shooting right back at us, and we unload them in many different ways. We unload them with cranes, as you see in New Jersey and in Bayonne and in Staten Island. We put them on the chassis, which are on the bottom left of this slide, or in some cases, we then put them directly on the highway system. So this is one way, again, that the transportation of goods has affected the inland part of the country and not just the ports. We also put them on rails today. We double stack them when all is well. We can take freight a long way on a very little amount of carbon if we put them on rails. And then we tote them across the country, and we deliver them either to industrial facilities, or probably more exciting today in a great reuse of landscape is the new intermodal system. This really is reintegrating distribution into what was the defense industry. The majority of these facilities are now being grown on old military arsenals. So this is the Joliet Arsenal in southwest of Chicago. Was incredibly contaminated. So it has some really great facilities and really great attributes that make it wonderful distribution. 2 Class 1 railroads. All arsenals had to have 2 means to get in by railroad. Incredibly contaminated, not fit for residential development, so it needed impervious cap. So we have big flat areas with impervious caps and 2 rail lines and lots of highway systems. They were perfect. They also happen to solve a little bit of our carbon problem, because instead of putting them on the road, we've been putting them on the rails. I just had to put this slide in because this is allegedly the new iPhone 6 on its way. And so we do get things on by other ways. We get them by air as well. This is incredibly expensive to breathe things that way, but if you've got a few $100s in the sides of a deck of cards, it pays. So I'm going to go global here a little bit more. This is a slide's not from 17th century, but these are trade patterns of colonial exports and imports. So we went to other countries, not only for religious persecution and all kinds of rights, but we went there for raw materials. And this shows the path of goods of where things went about 300–400 years ago. And the reason they went here not only was because some had things and some wanted things, but because we had methods of transportation which were based on wind, they were based on climate, they were based on wonderful ports. This is the global shipping routes and capacity of international trade today, and I would say that it looks pretty much the same. We have in and out going the same way. We have, the only thing we've really added here is petroleum, which is the dark lines you see all going through the Suez. That's petroleum. That's kind of the new thing that we've introduced. So what happens in this in climate change, and why has climate change affected this distribution pattern? So we've all seen slides like this, or seen many slides like this, and we've seen the Arctic melting. So the bigger line is what's called the Northwest Passage. You could never get a boat across the top. because it was filled with ice. It wasn't a reliable route. It was very dangerous, and there was no place to load or unload up there or refuel when you were going by. So a few years ago, the Northwest Passage has opened up on a year-round basis because of climate change. So what does that do? First, it allows us to get from places like Korea to Europe in 12 days instead of 17 days. It allows us to get from northern Russia down to Shanghai to trade resources. And that has opened up. So if civilization followed trade patterns 400 years ago, don't you think it's going to follow trade patterns 300 or 400 years from now? And I think that we have to be ready in the future for this. This is a wonderful little village on the east coast of Greenland. And one of my favorite things, if you look kind of on the left side of the slide, right in the middle, there's a stack of shipping containers already there, because that's how they get all their products, because they also, like Vietnam in the 70s, have no infrastructure whatsoever if you go to Greenland. And if you look at this images of the architecture and the landscape, and then you look at that image, so that's an image of 17th century place, which was based on global trade, nice climate, pretty good stuff, and it looks like this. So I think that we have to be ready for places like Eastern Greenland to look like this, or certainly get more dense over the next 200 years. I mean, while we can always try and stop global warming and climate change, we also need to brace for impact at the same time. So how does that affect New York? So, and I'll speed this up. So as you affect New York, you have the estuaries, which we saw earlier, places that have been filled. A lot of the development that's gone in there has been infrastructure and industrial facilities for distribution near the port, big flat areas, near highways, terrific places to locate industrial facilities, many of which we develop in our company. When we start to look like this in Manhattan, most of you know this as the Acqua Alta in Venice, and when this starts to happen in New York, which it inevitably will with the predictions that have been made, and the lack of regulatory will that we have, which of course is going to fly us into the mountain like this, we're going to need to use these areas for much needed storage capacity. I would argue that the industrial uses along the waterfront should not only be revered, but they should be preserved, because in the future, when we come up against that tidal surge, and we come up against the need for storage capacity and impact attenuation for storms, these are the perfect areas to have them. Currently, they're noisy, they're loud, they're not pedestrian friendly, they don't conserve water, they're ugly. But we will be very glad we have them about 100 years from now in order to redevelop into stormwater facilities. I will leave with this last slide, which is a slide of the Meadowlands, one of the places that I love to go and work. I've been working in these areas 22 years. These areas which we now discard will become storage capacity, and the infrastructure which goes through them, if to the extent that it can be preserved, or at least improved, in order to withstand the storm, these facilities and this area will be the lifeblood which saves our region, because it will take the impact of the next storm. I think that's the last slide. Yes, thank you very much.